I'm sure we've all come across people who have said, unless I see, I will refuse to believe. And it's quite common. And I guess the first person to say that was Thomas. It's interesting because the gospel, what the gospels are not propaganda. Propaganda usually is trying to throw a certain person or a group into a very positive light, or another group into a very negative light. But what the Gospels do is they actually throw the apostles into quite a negative light. They're not elevating them at all. And we have one of the apostles, one of the 12, one of those who was walking with Jesus for 3 years, who doesn't believe that Jesus would rise again. Unless I see the hands, the holes the hands had made, and put my hands in the side, I refuse to believe. He needed to see to believe. And St. Gregory the Great, writing in one of his commentaries, speaks about how this actually for us is a blessing. You know, you've got to think about it. Jesus appears on the day of the resurrection with the disciples, and there's only 10 of them. Thomas is missing, and Jesus appears and says, guys, where's Thomas? He should be with you. Why is he not here? What's happened? It's not as if Jesus is going to be surprised that he's not there, because Jesus is God. He knows everything. He knows Thomas is not going to be there. And actually, he is able, as always, to turn all things to good for those who love him. And this is what he does in this case. He knows Thomas is not going to be there, and yet he chooses to appear before the other disciples, the other apostles. Thomas doubts. He is like many of us who need to see something solid to believe. And here, St. Gregory, I'm going to read a little bit of his text, because I think it's a really good text for us to listen to today. So he says, what's what St. Gregory says, God's mercy worked wonderfully. For when the doubting disciple touched his master's wounded flesh, he cured the wound of our disbelief. His skepticism was more advantageous to us than the faith of the disciple who believed. Inasmuch as he came to believe by actually touching, we can lay aside all doubt. Our faith is made whole. So this doubting disciple who actually touched became a witness to the reality of the resurrection. We doubt and say, oh, no, this is, the scriptures they're just trying to get us to believe. And yet, here in the scriptures is this man who should have believed but didn't. His doubting and his conversion heals our doubt and gives us the grace of conversion. He goes on, Thomas touched him and cried out, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, Thomas, you have believed." The Apostle Paul said, "Only faith can guarantee the blessings that we hope for, or prove the existence of realities that remain at present unseen." Faith proves the realities of things unseen. So somebody might say to me, or I might say to somebody, we have pews in the church. Maybe one of our cameras can show the pews down here. We have pews in the church. Look, I might say to somebody, we have pews in the church. And they might say, oh, I don't know. Other churches don't have pews. Can I really believe you? Have faith in me. There are pews in the church. Look. So until I show them, they might not believe me. Until I come in and show them the pews. Look, here's a pew. You can now believe. But that's not faith any longer, because faith is believing something that is unseen, says St. Paul. Let me get the glasses on to go back. Proving the reality of something unseen. It is abundantly clear that faith provides the proof for those things that cannot be seen. I'm saying there are pews in my church, and you might believe or might not believe me. Where are we? Visible things do not require faith. They command recognition. Once you see it, pew, I no longer need to have faith in pews. I only recognize this is a pew. There's no more believing, it's just a recognition of fact. It is pew. So he goes on. I keep losing my place. You're being very patient with me. Thank you very much. It's only reckoned. Inasmuch as Thomas saw and touched, because Thomas saw and touched, inasmuch as he did this, why, this is St. Gregory, and Father Keith losing his place every single time he looks up at you. Why was it he said to him, because you have seen, you believed. He saw and he believed. I don't need to I see the pew. It is, I just recognize it. But Jesus says, you saw and you believed. What he saw was one thing. I'm looking at the pew. What he believed was another. A mortal man could not have seen God. What Thomas saw was a man who had risen from the dead. So Thomas, on seeing Jesus risen, could have said, I believe that you are risen, Lord. That could have been his response. But he did not say, I believe that you have risen. He said, my Lord and my God. He saw a human being who had risen, a human being who happened to also be God. He saw the human being risen. But what he believed, what he could not see, is Jesus is God. Thomas saw a man, but by his words, my Lord and my God, he acknowledged Jesus' divinity. It was by seeing that he believed, for he recognized the reality of a man and cried out that he was God, although he could not see God. And this reminds me of but the greatest mystery in the church. The greatest gift that the church has, where we see one thing and yet are asked to believe something else. We see bread, but we acknowledge something else. We believe something else. We see the bread and, like Thomas, exclaim, my Lord and my God.